says proof only or something like that, not final or whatever, so that when you give this to a client, they don't confuse it for your final images. Or judge composition only or something, could be useful for different things. So here we have our identity plate. That's where I chose it. Down here is a preview for it, but on that preview is a little bitty arrow pointing down in the lower right corner, and that's where if you've set up more than one identity plate, that you can choose between them. So that you might not have it look the same as the identity plate that you're using at the top of the Lightroom window. You might set one up that says proof only, or your copyright notice, or whatever you find to be useful. And if you want to create a new identity plate at this time, just click on that arrow and choose Edit, and you'll go into the same dialog box I was in earlier where I was able to create an identity plate. You can use it with a graphic or with text, and you can style it. Just make sure that when you're done creating it, you choose Save As, so you give it a name, like your copyright notice, whatever. So that's where we could apply it. I'm going to turn that off just because I consider it to be semi-ugly. And let's see what else we could do. We could also come down here and turn on watermarking. And with watermarking, you can set up different watermarks. And the way you can set them up is by going right here called Edit Watermarks. And just to make it easier to see, I'm going to make it so we don't have multiple images. Because with multiple images, a watermark might be so small in those images that it's harder to see. If I get it on a nice big image, it'll probably be easier for you to see what's going on. I have some watermarks already set up. Here's one called the Best of Ben badge. Do you see it down there in the corner? And here's another one just with some text. It says thebestofben.com. Now, didn't we actually, I'm trying to remember, I think we might have actually created those when we were talking about creating export presets. When we did export presets, I believe I mentioned that I always put these on images that are uploaded to things like Facebook, and the thing I mentioned that I really make sure it's on is anytime I put it on the website called Pinterest.com, because that's where most commonly I see my images, where it doesn't ever lead to my website. It's just on there, and I want to have something where people know where it's from. So I did talk about how to create those earlier, but if you didn't create them back then, you can just click on this menu next to watermarking and choose Edit Watermarks. And it's not dissimilar to setting up an identity plate, other than it shows you a picture. And when it shows you a picture, you can either do one as text or a graphic. And in here at the bottom, you type in your text, and over here you style it. You can control the opacity, how much you can see through it, that kind of stuff, and where it's positioned. But the settings are relatively straightforward if you take the time to look at them. But anyway, we did that earlier when we talked about export presets, so I don't want to go over it in detail here. But needless to say, here we can watermark our images using the same watermarking that we might use when we export our pictures, which I think is a really nice feature to have. Then we have page options. And this is where if we're going to print, let's say, a grid of multiple images, maybe I come up here and I have it so we have 4 images per page by having 2 rows and 2 columns. If I send these to a client and she says, I want the image in the upper right on page 4. Well, if there's no page numbers, how do we know that she didn't shuffle the pages? So here I can turn on page numbers, and it'll add a little page number in the lower right corner. I can add page info, and what the page info is set to right now is it says sharpening low, profile, and what printer. And that might have been so that if I have printed a small version of one of my images, I might want to remember so that I print in the future with the same settings, what my sharpening was, what my color profile was, and what printer it was printed on. So that way if somebody orders a print of a particular image, I can go back to my reference sheet and go, oh yeah, that was printed on my old whatever printer. I might want to go back to that same printer to print it again. The other thing you can put in here for page options would be crop marks. And it's not going to show you crop marks for where your image would actually end. It's more the cells that hold the image, the grid that you defined to contain those pictures. But I can put those on as optional settings. I like the idea of the page numbers for when I do my thumbnails. Then finally,